if they want to remove you from the country, they have to take you to immigration court and they have to have a judge order you removed. We're seeing a lot of people who they're getting their status revoked, where they're canceling visas, they're canceling green cards. But the main thing is you have a right to due process. There's still laws that say that they have to go about it a certain way. If you're a green card holder, then they have to go through proceedings to take that green card away from you. They can't, an ICE agent can't just do it.
Yeah.
Like that's the immigration court right there. That's where they decide whether you're allowed to have a green card. You don't have to consent to a phone search. And there's going to be a lot of litigation about that. They don't have to volunteer information to them. You have the right to still remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you, all of that kind of stuff when it comes to interacting with federal authorities. So I would just say don't sign anything like that. Don't sign anything giving up your rights, because that could be binding on you.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the Untangling podcast. It's an honor to have you. Today I'm joined by Matthew Peterson, who's an immigration lawyer here in Boston. I wanted to start off just by learning more about what are most of the immigration cases you focus on and what changes your firm and your customers have seen with the new Trump administration.
Sure. So yeah, mostly I do immigration paperwork like naturalization applications, adjustment of status. I also represent people in immigration court, deportation, removal proceedings, things like that as well. But it's a lot focused on the paperwork side of it. A little bit of, we've been having a lot of people recently who've had their student visas canceled, their SEVIS canceled. And a lot of it has changed a lot since Trump came into office. A lot of the discretionary decisions we were getting before during the Biden administration we're not getting those decisions now. Like literally in 2021 when Biden took over, we were getting people were getting released just based on new guidance that came out immediately upon the new presidency.
I want to talk more about students and people who are going through a naturalization process, but actually I was on the way here and I read on Telegram that ICE was near Harvard today. So I wanted to ask you, what would you advise to people that are on immigrant status right now in the US in different situations where they see ICE near their home or they're crossing the border, or in general when they're in public and there's law enforcement around?
Yeah, I would say that certainly you don't want to get in more trouble by impeding them, like actively impeding them or preventing them from doing what they view as their job. But you also don't have to volunteer information to them. You have the right to still remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you, all of that kind of stuff when it comes to interacting with federal authorities. And I would say that the first thing you should probably do if you're arrested by ICE is call a lawyer. And they can help you get released, help you get bond, help you figure out what the next steps would be to get legal status to be able to get out of that situation.
Mm-hmm. If ICE knocks on your home, is there anything you need to do if there's no warrant? Or I even seen situations where they would show like a blank warrant, or I guess what should people be aware of?
Yeah, so ICE, when it's technically a civil arrest, it's not a criminal arrest. So a lot of times they don't have the right to come into your house without a warrant. They don't have the right to do a lot of things like that a police officer could do or an FBI agent can do. They are civil enforcement officers. That being said, you want to make sure that you don't, I don't want people out there thinking that they should be resistant or things like that, because that could actually get you in trouble much worse than if you just cooperated with them and let the lawyers figure it out in court.
Mm-hmm. I also seen so many different TikToks around all the things that happen when you arrive into the port of entry at the airport, for example. I've heard that green cards are just being taken away, or for example that there's a paper that's sort of slid to a person to refuse their green card or reject the green card, phone searches, all kinds of things. What do you think, from your experience, is fear-mongering on social media, and what is actually happening?
So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of people who they're getting their status revoked. They're paroled into the country, which means that if you enter into the border, they can still decide to let you in even if you don't have legal status. And that's called parole. So there'll be a parole period. They're sending out emails that they're saying your parole is over. And they're doing these ham-handed things where they're canceling visas, they're canceling green cards. But the main thing is you have a right to due process. That's the minimum right that everyone has. And if you read the Constitution, it doesn't apply only to U.S. citizens. It applies to immigrants as well. And the thing is, you have a right to be heard in front of a judge, that you have a right to compel them to abide by the law, right? So I would say if you are facing those situations, then the best thing you can do is try to not make a scene, not do anything to resist them, and let the law figure it out afterwards.
So is it true that I guess they try to give you like a piece of paper to reject like your own legal status? Does that happen? And if you refuse to sign it, does that kind of then you're okay?
So yeah, a lot of times they trick people into saying, why don't you self-deport, why don't you surrender your green card, why don't you do all of these things to make their job a lot easier, so they don't have to worry about abiding by the law, they don't have to worry about doing things the right way. So I would just say don't sign anything like that. Don't sign anything giving up your rights, because that could be binding on you. Mm-hmm. You want to consult with somebody who knows immigration law and make sure that what you're signing is correct if you can. Otherwise, don't sign it.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to do a lot of things. They're testing the boundaries of immigration law, and they're testing what they can do in these situations to basically get as many non-citizens out of the country as possible. But you still have rights. There's still laws that say that they have to go about it a certain way. If you're a green card holder, then they have to go through proceedings to take that green card away from you. An ICE agent can't just do it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the immigration court right there. That's where they decide whether you're allowed to have a green card, whether you surrendered your green card based on a criminal conviction. They're the ones that make that decision, not an ICE agent shoving a piece of paper in your face and trying to intimidate you. Mm-hmm. So I would say, certainly, when I say be cooperative with them, like, don't try to attack them or anything like that, but you also, that doesn't mean signing away your rights. Mm-hmm. So if you don't understand a piece of paper that you're getting slid across the table, don't sign it.
And in terms of phone searches, have any of your clients be subjected to that, and have any of them gotten in trouble for perhaps what was on their phone?
I have not experienced that personally. I've read this, probably the same thing in the news you have. Mm-hmm. I mean, those sorts of things, it can be easy when you're crossing the border. I just want this to be over with. I just want to go home. I just want to go back to my life. Because crossing the border and dealing with federal agents is never a pleasant experience. But you don't have to consent to a phone search. And there's going to be a lot of litigation about that. They try to use the fact that they have you in a captive situation to make you sign away your rights, and you don't have to sign away your rights, and you don't have to give them access to your phone. But yeah, I've certainly read a lot of things about that, even lawyers giving up their phones with client communications, even U.S. citizens being questioned at the border. All of these things, I mean, there's going to be a lot of litigation about it. Let the litigation play out. Don't surrender your rights, and don't give them anything they don't have the right to.
Yeah. If you're on the non-immigrant status, for example, F1, the student visa, and they reject the entry to the United States. It's much easier than with a green card. What are the options that the person has?
So if you're saying if you're coming into the border, you have an F1, not a green card, and they say you're not allowed in.
After spring break, for example, you're coming back in and they don't want to let you in. What exactly happens? Do they revoke your visa, or how does that process work? What does it mean for a person, and what are their potential next steps?
Sure. So I would say that a lot of times, as far as student visas, you have a DSO, a designated school officer, or something. Maybe that's the who is in charge of your F1 status, in charge of the SEVIS portal, things like that. I would say get in touch with your school about reapplying, get in touch with your school about getting the process started again. But if you are rejected at the border, a lot of times there's not much you can do. ICE agents have the authority to decide whether to parole you in or not.
Yeah.
But I would just say, stay calm, try to talk to somebody who knows this stuff, and try to figure out what your next steps are, because every case is so different, right? Like we were having a lot of people whose student visas are being revoked just based on arrests that aren't even convicted.
I've seen a parking ticket being...
Yeah. I mean, which is just absolutely outrageous. I mean, you have, these people still have the right to due process, right? Even if you're here on a student visa, even if you're here on something else, you have the right to have that process be heard. And a lot of times they're also telling people to self-deport. They're saying you need to leave the country now.
Is that true?
No. So they have to, again, that's the immigration court right there, that tall building, the JFK building. If they want to remove you from the country, they have to take you to immigration court, and they have to have a judge order you removed. You don't have to abide by that necessarily.
So I want to talk about the students that got their status revoked while in here, but just so somebody who's traveling abroad, for example, on a student status, is aware of what could happen. So if they reject parole at an airport, do you have like a special room that you go to? You're not in the country, you're at the airport. Did you just take the next plane out somewhere? What would happen?
So yeah, sometimes it would be the next plane out. I mean, they have holding cells, and I've heard horror stories at Logan Airport with people being held there for a long time, waiting to figure out what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But if you are rejected, then I would say that the best situation, if you're not going to be paroled in, is just try to figure out with your school officer when you get back home. You don't want to be charged with a federal crime for resisting an officer or doing anything like that.
Yeah. So if it happens in the US, so you've been seeing that emails have been sent out, can somebody just actually revoke someone's status for almost no reason? How legitimate are those emails? And I guess, what does it all mean for example, a student? I think it's a good example for a non-immigrant status.
Yeah. So those emails, a lot of times they are legitimately from USCIS or Homeland Security or whoever, and they're ham-fisted attempts to do what I was saying earlier, just get as many non-citizens out as possible. But they've read in the news, they've even been sending them to immigration lawyers. U.S. citizen immigration lawyers are getting these emails saying your parole is revoked, you need to leave the country. So just, if you get one of those emails, talk to somebody about your exact situation. They don't have unlimited authority. You have certain expectations. I mean, college is very expensive. If you're an international student coming here to be educated, you certainly shouldn't be faced with this, but it's our reality right now. And just try to talk to somebody about your options, because you do have options. You do have options to reapply. You do have other options to deal with this. It's something that's on the breaking edge of, just in the past couple of weeks this has started happening. So we're still trying to figure it out as well. There are lawsuits all around the country where judges are making decisions that will apply to this situation. So it's kind of a work in progress at the moment.
If you're going through the court procedure to defend your student status, for example, are you able to continue attend the university as you're going through that, or everything has to be put on hold?
It depends on your exact situation. If you don't have an F1 status anymore, then your university you may not be able to attend classes. It's up to your specific university and how they're handling it. I mean, we're in unprecedented territory here as far as how this is happening, and there are going to be a lot of legal developments happening very quickly over the next few weeks. Probably by the time this comes out, there will be some news about this that'll settle the issue, or hopefully give people more peace of mind about this.
Yeah. How widespread are these situations? Because I'm curious how many. I feel like anybody in any immigration status is so afraid right now. And is this kind of just a couple of individual cases to sort of spread the fear, or is it happening on the mass scale with a lot of people? And I guess, like, especially for those who are in these immigration statuses, how likely it is that they specifically will be affected?
I mean, it's happening. It seems to be happening automatically. Almost like it doesn't seem like there's anyone actually reviewing these things and determining whether this person should be deported or not, their status should be revoked or not. It seems to be just, we did an FBI background search, something popped up, we're revoking their status. So it is very widespread. I mean, we've had a bunch of calls about this recently.
Yeah.
And I mean, certainly there's no use in being scared about it, but just if it happens to you, just know how to deal with it and know what to do. Talk to your school officer, talk to an attorney, somebody like that who can give you your options.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was also wondering, in categories that are more protected with green cards, what have you seen happening to people that are currently on that green card status?
Well, yeah, I mean, a green card, you have a right to permanently be here. I mean, that's an expectation that you'll be able to stay here long term. And that is a right that's protected by the law and protected by due process. So they can't just, take it away willy-nilly. And they can't just take it away on a whim. They have to go through a process to do that. And they're trying to skip that a lot of times, is by just saying, well, your green card is revoked because we believe this. Well, they have to prove it. They have to go to court and prove it. And a lot of times people are getting so scared because they've never been in this situation before. Yeah. They've never dealt with law enforcement. They've never gotten a scary letter from a federal agency like this before. So they're just signing away their rights. They're just self-deporting. They're giving up their green cards. And you don't want to do that. You have a right to contest this in court. And that's what you should do in these situations, is contest it in court. Don't give anything up.
Yeah. Are you helping anybody right now that is going through a court procedure from a recent revocation of their status with the Trump administration? And I guess, how is that process going? Are judges also affected by this new administration?
So yeah, that's a lot of questions in one. I've had people, I mean, we represent a couple people who've been here for decades, and they have family who are U.S. citizens. They don't have their paperwork together. ICE was arresting one person in their household that they were after, and they actually have a fingerprint device, apparently. They can scan somebody's fingerprint and see what their legal status is. And these two, elderly parents with no criminal history were arrested. And one of them, they were arrested, taken to immigration detention. One of them was actually shipped to Georgia.
The country?
No, the state. And, it takes a few weeks to even get a hearing before a judge to determine bond. And fortunately, we were able to get both of them out. But these sort of things they're just doing it in a ham-fisted way to try to get these people out. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate.
What was the status of the elderly couple?
So they had overstayed a visa, but they do have a path to citizenship now, or a path to a green card now. They just hadn't. The issue is that this is just a paperwork error a lot of times. This is, you didn't fill out your paperwork soon enough. And these things are expensive to do. And we're acting like these people are criminals, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're somebody who, it's April 17th today. Everyone just filed their taxes a couple of days ago. Think if you were removed from the country for filling out your taxes wrong. I think half the country would be out of here.
Speaking of taxes, now there is a deal that IRS will be able to share information with the ICE agents. How does this look like? Is this going to be mass sharing of information, or is it ICE having to request information for each specific individual?
I would assume that based on prior experience with the administration, that it's going to be some automated process where they can see citizenship status of people who filed their taxes not under a social security number, so they don't have proof necessarily of legal status, and they're probably just going to start indiscriminately trying to get these people out.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate because these are people trying to do the right thing, right? These are people who are voluntarily paying taxes to be here. They're not the criminals that we're talking about. They're not MS-13. They're people who are trying to do the right thing and build a life in this country. Yeah. I know it's a cliche, but Statue of Liberty, are we just going to take it down?
Well, France requested to have it back.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
It's sad because, a lot of us are recent immigrants, even U.S. citizens, even second, third generation. And to demonize these people who are just trying to live the American dream, and who are voluntarily paying their taxes it's really sad, and it's really a sad commentary on where we are.
Yeah. So do you expect that once the people file taxes by the deadline, they're just going to look through all the information and pretty much show up at the addresses that were shared on the tax returns?
Potentially, or they could get letters in the mail that say, hey, you don't have status here, please leave. And again, there's a process to go through to remove people from the country. It's not just sending a letter.
Yeah.
And I think the most concerning part for me, and I don't know if we're going to get to this later, is using the First Amendment against people. We have students on these campuses who are speaking out in favor of Palestine, and they're being named national security threats because of that. Whereas if you spoke out in favor of Israel, then you're not a national security threat. That's a blatant First Amendment violation.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Also, there was a recent order for people to self-report their undocumented status. What if I was in that position and reached out to you for advice and sort of help with processing this information? What would you advise to those people?
Don't do it. If they're asking you to self-report, and that's unfortunately a lot of the way people get caught in the system, is they come out and they apply for status through certain legal methods, and if they're rejected for that status, it then they get sent into removal proceedings.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, even if you think you have a path to a green card or some form of legal status, it's sometimes better to wait, sometimes better to review all of your options before you decide whether you want to go with that route, because it could actually end up bringing you to their attention. But certainly don't bring yourself to their attention. Like, I mean, I don't know if you can see the sign up there. You never see a fish on the wall with its mouth shut.
That's so funny.
Don't become the fish on the wall. Certainly, yeah. Don't self-report. I mean, that's not going to do you any good. I mean, these people aren't going to give you credit for it.
Yeah. In terms of receiving these letters that I guess like asking you to self-deport, if you are, I guess what I don't understand, if you're already on an undocumented status here, does that letter do anything? Because you're already sort of, well, I guess in some senses like violating the law of being in this country. So another paper to sort of remind you of that, does that mean anything really?
So there are different types of being undocumented, right? So you have certain people who came in legally and who overstayed their tourist visa or some other visa like that. You have other people who enter the country illegally. But a letter does not affect their legal status necessarily, but it does affect whether you're going to be brought to the attention of the authorities. So you're saying that I've never heard of this before. Undocumented people receiving letters saying, well, turn yourself in?
For example, as we were talking about the IRS data sharing, that they're likely, for example, to receive a letter once they've been like identified as undocumented.
Yeah.
Would that really, I guess like if you're already undocumented, you sort of already kind of, the system wants you to leave the country. So that, I was just curious the meaning of what that letter would have.
I mean, I would assume it would be something like what these people are getting about, your parole is revoked, you need to self-deport. And they're hoping that people will cooperate in this because they don't have the manpower to do what they want to do. They're hoping people will help them out. And you don't have to.
If you received the letter that your parole was revoked, what is your timeline? If you're still in the country, how fast do you have to get to the courts? Because you probably also don't want to be flagged by the system as you were like overstaying some sort of status for any future applications.
So if you get, a lot of these letters are saying immediately, you should leave the country. And they don't really have a legal basis for that. Certainly if you don't have legal status here, you don't have the expectation of remaining here, but there's a process to go through to determine whether not legal status does not mean deportable. You could have defenses of deportation. There are a wide range of defenses, withholding or removal, asylum, things like that you could assert in court, even if you're undocumented. So don't let that don't help them out by doing their job for them.
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to ask about how given that so many people are worried about what could happen with them if ICE is at your door to apprehend you, what your sort of nearby future for a couple of months is going to look like, and how does that process work?
So if you get arrested by ICE, then you are taken to usually a detention center that has cooperation with ICE. ICE doesn't have a lot of their own detention centers. They co-opt local jails. So here in Massachusetts, like Plymouth County is where a lot of people are sent. They're also sent to Rhode Island at the Wyatt Detention Center, or even sometimes sent out of state to Pennsylvania, Georgia, wherever I've heard of people being sent to. And the ICE agents, it's kind of weird because it's not what they call an Article 3 judge who's in charge of it. It's an administrative law judge. So the judges who preside over there in immigration court are not appointed and confirmed by the Senate. They're not a separate branch of government. They're executive branch officials who are making this decision. They're political appointees.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times when a new administration comes in, especially during this back and forth with Trump, they'll clear out a lot of the judges and appoint their own judges.
There must be so many, there's so, like, I imagine there are hundreds of immigration judges across the country.
There are, and but they're very backed up, which is another story. But so if you are, the ICE agent is in some ways equivalent to the judge in terms of determining your custody status. Now, if the judge determines you should be released, then that is a bond request you have to make through the court. And they'll set you up for a hearing within, I forget the exact statutory period, I think it's like 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, for a judge to determine whether you are, whether you're entitled to a bond, and then you have to post a bond to be released.
So before that happens, you pretty much are in a jail, and you don't have any access to phones or internet at that time, or what is your options in terms of finding an attorney, contacting your family?
So if you're in jail, you still have the right to make phone calls, things like that, and you still have the right to consult with an attorney as well. I mean, a lot of times people have family on the outside who contact an attorney to discuss a bond request, things like that, figure out the best way forward. Unfortunately, you're not entitled to an attorney. If you were arrested by the FBI or you're arrested by the Boston police, then you'd be appointed an attorney if you couldn't afford one. In immigration court, you don't have that right. You have the right to an attorney at no expense to the government, which means that they don't have to pay for it. So, but you still have the right to consult with an attorney. You still have the right to, have an attorney represent you through that process and, make phone calls to family, things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of people represent themselves and end up just admitting it and asking to be deported. And sometimes that might be your only option, but it's always best to have an attorney talk to you because you could have options you don't realize.
Yeah. If you're in that situation, what's the best way for you to find a good attorney, given that you probably don't have access to some good directory or websites to cross-check the references?
Sure. So I know that they're required to give out certain lists of free attorneys and free resources that are available, but it's my understanding those resources are stretched very thin at this point. But I would say that a lot of times it's easier with family on the outside. We're all so dependent on the internet now. I don't think I have a listing in the phone book. I don't even know if they print phone books anymore.
I'm not sure.
But so it can be tough to find someone that you trust. And that's why if you are worried about that, it might be a good idea for you to have that idea before you even go in. Like, here's somebody I could call, here's how I could set that up. Because if you're alone in the jail without access to anyone on the outside, it can be very tough to find someone who can help you.
And once you get to the bond hearing, that's where they're going to decide whether you could go through the rest of the process from your home, or are some people rejected the bond?
Yeah, so the bond process, after the bond hearing, if you are detained, then there's kind of a fast track of the process where you get, in immigration court, you have what's called a master calendar hearing, which is basically where you have to, what is your defense to the deportation? You have to enter pleadings, and then you get an individual hearing where the judge will actually hear your case. And detained, that process for a person who's detained can go a lot quicker, be a couple of months. Whereas if you're out, I mean, there are people who wait decades.
Wow.
To get their day in court in immigration court. So they are insanely backed up. I mean, to the point that they're bringing in judges from all over the country. I mean, you could be held here in Massachusetts and your judge could be in Texas. It's just a really strange process, and the laws matter depending on what state you're in. So like in Massachusetts, in the First Circuit, the government has the burden of proving that you're not entitled to bond. They have to prove that you're either a danger or a flight risk, and that the flight risk can't be overcome with a bond.
Yeah.
In Georgia, it's you that has the burden of proving that you are entitled to a bond.
Oh.
So it just depends on where you are. I mean, the process is just so opaque and confusing. I mean, I've had times where I've showed up to immigration court and they say, oh, well, you're not set today. You're actually set next year. They'll just cancel court dates without telling you about it.
Oh, wow.
So immigration court it's a very strange process as well.
So if you received bond and you're going through this years and years long process, throughout the time, are you able to apply for some other statuses, get work authorization, and sort of start situating your life, or is that available?
Yeah, definitely. So you can apply for status, some through USCIS, and have it adjudicated in the immigration court. So like the process of getting a green card, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, for example, you can do that process while you're in removal proceedings. But it's just that the judge decides the final process, the I-485, whereas the USCIS decides the I-130. So you can file an I-130. You can also get work authorization as well.
I-130, is that when you have a sponsor who wants to sponsor you for a green card?
Yes. So I-130 is the application that the sponsor produces. Like if you're a U.S. citizen, you're applying for your spouse, you would submit the I-130 to USCIS to begin the process of getting a green card. But it's a judge who would decide the 485, which is the adjustment of status.
That makes sense. I was also wondering, I've heard those cases where people were locked up pretty much for years, also in government facilities, as they were apprehended by immigration services. Are those exceptions, and why does it happen?
So a lot of times, because they prioritize detained cases so much, it's very rare. I think John Oliver did an episode about it recently, about that people aren't usually held in immigration detention that long, because if you ever want to just go back to your country, you can. But obviously, if there's other ways, other things you want to do, other processes you want to apply for, then you can do that as well through the process. I think it's pretty rare for someone to be held that long, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are benefits or paths to relief that they're applying for that take a while to get through, but it's pretty rare.
When I did my other episode about immigration and how much deportations cost to the American taxpayer, got a lot of comments of take away the due process, it'll be so much cheaper. Given that this debate is happening, would you shed the light on what are the legal basis for that to happen? And I think there are very good arguments of why it would really be impossible to take away the due process from any legal standpoint.
I mean, the thing people don't understand about due process is that it protects you if you're innocent. You know, like if a U.S. citizen is arrested and they're deported without due process, that means they weren't given the opportunity to prove that they're a U.S. citizen. You know, so that due process exists to protect the innocent as much as the guilty. I know this isn't a guilty or innocent, but protects the U.S. citizen as much as it protects the other people. So Trump said in the Oval Office the other day about we're going to move to homegrown people now, move to U.S. citizens now, potentially right. Sending them to El Salvador. I mean, that's really scary. I mean, you read the Declaration of Independence, it talks about basic due process. The Constitution talks about basic due process, and part of the thing that makes us Americans is that we give that to everybody. And it's scary. Like a case, I think it was out of the Fourth Circuit just came out, a judge wrote this extraordinary opinion about I forget the guy's name, but he was sent to El Salvador.
Yes, the Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Yes. So he was sent to, this judge wrote this extraordinary opinion just about going back to the basics of respecting each branch's authority, respecting due process. And this was a Reagan appointee. This wasn't some bleeding heart liberal.
Yeah.
And the idea that, those people who are writing that in your comments, like just take away due process, that due process applies to them too. And if they don't have the right to produce that they're a U.S. citizen, assuming that they are, then the same thing could happen to them. So that's the problem, right? I mean, right behind us, those glass towers of the Holocaust Memorial. You know, and they have the quote in front of it that talks about, you know, first they came for certain people, I didn't care because I wasn't one of them. Then they came for other people, I didn't care because I wasn't one of them. And when they came for me, there was no one left.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying we're Nazi Germany, but, you know, we are starting to erode a lot of those things that matter to us as a country, matter to us as Americans.
Yeah. You mentioned that immigration judges are political appointees. Have you started seeing a lot of judges being replaced in Boston even?
So I haven't really kept up with that as much. I haven't noticed, but I did notice it in 2021 when it came around, because the judge who was in charge of that case was quickly replaced by a different judge, and my guy was let out. And so it can happen quickly, and a lot of these judges are replaced, and a lot of there are new guidelines that come out for the USCIS and for ICE to make these discretionary decisions. So that's what happens in a new administration, is guidelines come out almost immediately that implements whatever. And it's so sad that immigration has become such a political football, because our immigration system, everyone agrees, is completely broken and does not make any sense. But we can't do anything about it because we're stuck with these oversimplifications of the process.
Yeah. I was looking into it, and actually for an extremely long time, immigration was very much a bipartisan issue. There was this consensus that people that are already here, if they're undocumented, provide them with a status, secure the border, and then do the reform to the system.
Right.
And I feel like only with Trump coming into the office, it became such a partisan issue that there's almost no way to come to an agreement to make a reform. But United States also heavily relies on immigrants.
Exactly.
And especially I think like states like California and Texas, a lot of scholars suggest that they would be devastated if all the immigrants have left those communities. And even for F1 visas, colleges rely a lot on students paying the full tuition for their education. Given that we survived Trump's first term, what are the differences, and I guess what are your expectations going forward of what's going to happen?
I wish that I could be more positive and optimistic. I mean, I think there's a huge resistance movement to this, or people who are fighting every day to help ensure that people's rights are protected. And, I'm really impressed with a lot of the litigation and, DC surrounding Mr. Garcia, who was sent to El Salvador, and all of the national attention that has. And I am discouraged by the other side of it, that, we're talking about someone who's built a life here. We're talking about a human being. We're not talking about using illegal as a noun, so as far as my expectations in the future, I mean, I hope that one day we can get past this moment in immigration law and treat it like the problem that it is. Because people don't, a lot of people think that there are two statuses. There's US citizen and undocumented or illegal. And there's so many statuses in between. And people, if you don't understand those statuses, then why do you think that you can impose, why do you think that your idea of the system is correct?
Yeah.
Why are we demonizing these people? They're demonizing the temporary workers who come in and, harvest the fields in Texas and California and things like that. Why are we demonizing these people who are just trying to make a life for their family? And I always think about, if I was stuck in a different country where, I was potentially in danger, I would do whatever I could to get out of there to someplace safe, especially with my kids and my family. And, then to treat those people like they're evil and they're not like us is just really, really disheartening. But I mean, the point is that people think that, oh, we just go about it the right way. Why don't you just go about it the right way, stand in line like everyone else? And you don't realize that standing in line, I haven't checked the most recent visa bulletin, but if you have a brother or sister who's a U.S. citizen in the United States and to apply for a visa to come here, I mean, the waiting period could be over a decade.
Yeah.
And so, and you can't just say, I'm a good person, I want to come here, make me a U.S. citizen. You have to have some legal hook, some legal path here. And I feel like there's so much misinformation and so much confusion about that we all agree that the system is broken and it certainly needs to be fixed, but oversimplifying it is not going to help anything.
Yeah, no, 100%. Is there anything you would want to say to the people that are maybe often have this overly simplistic view? If you were to educate somebody who gets their immigration information off Twitter alone, what would be the main point you would want to tell them?
I mean, I think that we need to think about people as people. I mean, I think that's where it needs to start. I mean, if you don't have empathy for a fellow person who's, potentially going through horrible things in their home country, where their home country isn't stable, their home country, can get them and kill them any day, based on their religion, based on their gender, based on all of these things. I mean, I don't know how to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't have that basic human empathy with somebody, and recognizing that this is a person who just wants a better life for their family, just like you do.
Yeah.
And they're not evil. They're not, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, but immigrants commit crime at lower rates than U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And to treat them like they're criminals, to treat them like they're gang members is just not accurate at the basic level. But I mean, I think just having that basic human empathy for other people, that's where it has to start. And to recognize that these aren't people who are trying to take your jobs. These are people who are trying to build a life for themselves, and there's plenty for everybody.
Yeah.
I guess that would be my one thought, is that if all of the things were true about Obama, that they were saying that Obama was going to take away their guns and kidnap right-wingers and all of that stuff was true, then what would they want to do? They would want to go to a different country. They would want to flee that. They want to be a refugee. They would want to claim asylum in wherever country they wanted to go to. And why are we treating these people who have that same problem in El Salvador and in Costa Rica or wherever else like they're different from us? They're facing the same problems that humanity has faced since the beginning, and they're just trying to do their best to protect themselves and their family. And they're different from us in a lot of ways, as far as culturally and the way people look, but they're at the bottom level, they are facing the same problems we are and trying to do the best thing for their family.
Yeah. In terms of what you see in terms of new executive orders being challenged in courts, what are the biggest battlegrounds taking place right now?
So, they're new. The thing about executive orders is that they don't have the power of law necessarily, and they can't, like the birthright citizenship was one of the first ones that came out, that, there was all this worry that you're just going to lose your citizenship. They're going to take away your citizenship. And that's not even what the order said. It only applied to people who were born after the order was. But at the end of the day, you can't even do Like the executive order is not the way to do that thing, to take away birthright citizenship, which has been since after the Civil War in this country. As far as the current battlegrounds, I feel like there are just so many fronts that people are fighting on right now. You know, renditioning somebody to El Salvador. I mean, the White House just put out that he's never coming back.
Yeah.
You know, that a 9-0 Supreme Court ruled that he had to come back. A judge in DC ruled that he had to come back. And I feel like there are so many battles that it's hard to narrow it down or even think about like what's most important. I would say that as far as like things like the birthright citizenship, it's important to read it and understand where your rights are and understand the limitations that the administration has. But yeah, I mean, I would, I feel like there's new fronts opening up every single day. Mm-hmm. It's hard to kind of keep track of everything.
That's fair. I also did myself see that there are several things that my fellow immigrants are doing that are sometimes stupid and have hurt their chances for getting a legal status here. In terms of what you have seen across your clients and maybe in general, people saying or like posting different social media posts or perhaps doing some other types of mistakes that are going to seriously hurt their chances in the future as they're going through different procedures.
So I would say I often get calls from people who say, hey, I submitted my immigration paperwork and was rejected for this reason, or, you know, one of the big things is in the immigration process, you have to prove you're in a bona fide marriage, for example. And there are a lot of people who will come to me after the whole process, they've been denied, and say, how can you help me? And a lot of times the answer is, I can't. Like, the damage has already been done. You know, so I'm not sure what people are posting on social media that could hurt them, but I can tell you that a lot of the agents at USCIS do a lot of research about people, and like pull public records and pull things like that. And one of the worst things you can do is lie to USCIS about and forms and things like that, because the cover-up is worse than what a lot of times actually the truth was, worse than what you're covering up.
Yeah.
And lying to a USCIS agent or lying about that sort of thing, you have to assume that they're going to find it. Because I've seen them go through crazy lengths to research people and determine whether their marriage is bona fide or determine whether they're here legally and things like that.
Do you have any examples? I'm curious.
I don't want to give any specifics about it, but yeah, I mean, I've seen them go through, you know, old newspaper articles and, oh, well, in this newspaper article, you were interviewed by this person, you claimed you were single.
Wow.
It's like, well, you were supposedly married at the time. Or, you know, you go through people's Facebooks and saying you claim to be married to this person, but you're posting with this other person all the time. You don't have any pictures with this person. So I would just say the problem is with trying to lie to them in the first place.
Yeah.
But certainly you don't want to post anything that could potentially expose you to being considered a national security risk, whatever that means nowadays. But yeah, I mean,
I also found this post. One thing that would always make you inadmissible if you ever claim to have a green card when you don't have a green card or be a citizen, that's going to cancel any chances forever, from my understanding.
So there are, and claiming to be a U.S. citizen is another one, and voting is another one, where that can really hurt your chances, because any sort of lie to the U.S. Immigration Services is going to follow you for the rest of your life. So certainly don't claim you have a green card or claim you're a U.S. citizen or vote, especially, without having that legal status, because that could prevent you from ever having it. Mm-hmm. And even like small criminal offenses, like things like you may not think a shoplifting is that bad. Yeah. Like a lot of people do it, unfortunately. But that's the sort of thing that will that could cancel your green card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of if you have ever overstayed your status, that's not one of those things. For example, I was looking into it. If it's a marriage-based green card, that often would be fine. Do you have any thoughts around that when it is very much like hurts your chances for some visas and where it sort of is disregarded?
So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, a lot of times the regulations and the law is that a lot of those things kind of get swept aside. I've helped people get green cards who have overstayed visas by years. The issue is that if you then leave the country, that's what triggers a ban. If you have a period of unlawful presence and you leave the country, that can actually trigger a ban for you coming back in. But it really depends on, if you overstay, what the status you're seeking is, what your basis for that is. Like I said, a lot of times with people who are married to U.S. citizens, it doesn't really matter, but it can for others. It just depends on what exactly the situation is.
Yeah. Also, I know that there are fears in some like immigrant communities to be able to apply for some sort of city benefits. For example, some like in New York City, you have local government provided healthcare assistance. I've heard even debates about it, that they don't really look at that, they're never going to see it, or that's going to ban you from being able to receive any status. What are your thoughts on that?
So in terms of when you fill out the 485, which is the application for a green card or to adjust status, there's a list of, I think it's like 60 something questions, and applying for benefits that are only intended for people with legal status, you have to self-report that. And like I said, if you lie about it, you have to assume they're going to find it. I mean, getting city records may be more difficult. It depends on how much they are cooperating with federal authorities. But I would say that I'm not trying to tell people that it's not important, but you have to weigh what the benefit you're getting from that versus the chance of you being denied for citizenship later on, being denied a green card later on, and things like that. I mean, it's hard to say whether New York City doesn't have a history of complying with federal immigration authorities in that way, but you never know what can happen. And I would say that if lying on any sort of application for benefits is one of those things that will not only, you could be charged criminally for it as well. So if it requires you to say, I'm certifying that I'm a green card holder or whatever, and you lie about that, then you could be charged with a crime too. And that sort of crime of dishonesty is one of the things that will prevent you from getting status in the future.
That makes sense. I have one last question that I ask my every guest. Okay. If you would be able to pass one law, what would it be?
I could pass one law. Does it have to be about immigration, or can it be about anything?
Anything.
That's a good question. I would say that that's tough. Should have been prepared for that. Pass one law. What would it be? I would say it's tough because the immigration system, there needs to be so many reforms to it, that it's tough to say what one thing you would do, because I assume you're not talking about a law with like a whole bunch of provisions. It's like one specific thing that I could change about the law.
Well, maybe it could be like fixing one issue, not like the whole immigration situation, but like subsection of it.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that's really come into focus recently is the immigration's interference with local court systems, things like that. I don't know if you saw the judge in Boston Central Division, which is right over there. Recently, ICE arrested somebody in the middle of a trial and took them took them into immigration detention, didn't bring them back for a criminal trial that they were fighting. Wow. So, and unfortunately, it's almost beyond the reach of state courts because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution. It's basically, the state court can't really do anything about it. So I would say that there's got to be some sort of sanctuary or process where, because it's not only defendants, it's victims. Yeah. You know, if you have victims who are scared to come forward because they're worried that if they come forward that they could be arrested by ICE. I mean, I would say that if there was one law I would pass, it'd be some sort of sanctuary for people who are involved in state courts and not have ICE be able to go after them. Yes.
And for anybody who's a victim of a crime, my understanding is if that happened to you, there is a green card for that situation where you're cooperating with an investigation of a crime.
There is a visa specifically for a V visa or a U visa for those people. There is a process for it. It's not just automatic. So you have to apply through the actual U.S. attorney to get that visa. They have to co-sign the application. It's not, a lot of people think that I'm a victim of a crime, I can just get a green card. It's not that simple.
I see.
So, and certainly a lot of people, even if if ICE isn't actually targeting victims who are coming to court, a lot of people are worried about that. And I think that the sanctity of local justice, state court systems should be respected. That would be what I would, I guess, start with.
That's a good one. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot and I appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, thank you.